Okay, hello everyone. This recording took a bit to set up. I was struggling with it a bit. Anyway, so yeah, welcome to a showcase of a 4xn piston door. So 4 by almost any width. There are other things happening here that I was working on that I'm not showcasing, but if you're curious, these are components for the 32-bit computer I'm building. But this is what I wanted to show. So this, as the title should say, is a 4xn piston door. So this is expandable sideways. And I don't think there's probably a way to make this wider than 15 blocks, but I don't know how to get any wider than that. So currently I think 15 blocks wide is the max, but that should be fine. Anyway, so I'm just going to trigger it and let you see what happens, and then I'll describe what's happening, and I'll explain exactly what all the processes are. But this took quite a while to figure out. I did the piston layout first, and then I did the piston connections, and then I did the feed tape setup, and then I did the feed tape programming. So that's the order of systems that I put together here. But I chose to use a feed tape system because it's very hard to make a feed tape become too bulky. And that's not quite true, but it's very hard to make a feed tape become a tangle. Sorry, I got a notification, but I think it's fine. Okay, there we go. So it's done now. But yeah. So it's easy for redstone to just become a tangle. Like, you can see the connections here are a mess. I couldn't get a good way to connect all of these. But the feed tape itself, that's all the actual sequencing right there. And here's the closing, by the way. There. So, now that you've seen how this works, I will attempt to explain what's going on. I'm going to start with the piston layout, and more specifically, I'm going to start with this part right here. This is, right here, those 3 blocks, that's the block storage. So you saw when it opened, the top block became the floor, but the other 3 blocks need to get put somewhere, so those 3 blocks end up putting in this space, and this space is controlled by this double piston extender and piston there. So you could see while I was running it, if you were watching that part, this goes up and down to reach each point. I could also probably have wired this slightly differently, kind of, but not really. One of the key problems I was working with here is that there's no good way to connect a wire from the side to every single layer that triggers just one piston. So, like, for example, if I temporarily triggered this thing here, for example, like, this should be triggering this. This should just be powering this block. But it still triggers the piston below it because of quasi-connectivity. And you can see that once there's another piston there, that's what you used. In most cases, that doesn't matter, because in most cases, the only time that I want to trigger a piston is when the piston is right next to the thing I'm triggering it with. But in this case, I always need this to be here, this observer. This observer is what allows me to trigger a piston all the way up here to get that top block. And because of that, there needs to be a piston here, but I also need to be able to put a piston here, which becomes a problem, because when I trigger this top piston, which I'm not going to do because that will break something, because it's currently not in a state that will allow that, but if I trigger this piston, it will also trigger this one, no matter what. and that breaks things. So the solution, I move that piston up and down to get it out of the way of that piston's signal. So at no point does this piston have to be here, and also this piston have to be triggering. So if I trigger this again, then you can see that double piston extender extended. However, it's then pulled back down, because if that was still up, that sequence pulling this observer back would trigger that piston as well and push it back into the way again. And that would hit a piston. That piston. There are a couple ways I could choose to do this. I chose to do it this way because it was the first thing that I thought of that worked. But, yeah. Another way I could have done it, for example, is I could have had this piston also be part of this stack. So, like, instead of this piston just being able to go up by 2 blocks, I could have made it to be able to go up by 3, and this piston could act as that piston. If that was a little hard to understand, it would basically be I would add another piston down here, and I wouldn't have that top piston. That would allow me to use this piston as the same piston here. Entirely possible, and probably wouldn't add any timing differences, but it actually adds unnecessary redstone because I need an extra piston here. So, yep, this works. Also, just the whole sequencing, one of the main things that I stuck to with sequencing is nothing happens unless it's absolutely required at that point. So what I mean by that is that, like, for example, on retraction here, this piston at some point needs to be pushed up. That piston does not need to be pushed up until that moment, at which point it does. You can see it gets pushed up and then immediately triggered. And I think that might happen, yeah, and then that happens again there. And it will happen again one more time. Also, just something that happens because of the way this works is that this top section is the busiest. That's where most things happen. The rest of the tower is just to be able to get the pistons there in the first place. And be able to get, and also be able to reach the bottom of the block storage. But yeah, you can see there how the observer gets pushed up to be able to trigger the piston that otherwise could not be powered. Now, the only thing that bothers me about the system that I was not able to get to remove is this has to be a slab, no matter what. Or more accurately, this has to be a transparent block. So this can't be like the iron block. It has to be a slab or a stair or glass or glowstone. So things like that. That's the only thing that kind of bothers me, but you can easily get around that by just building the room out of something with something that has a slab equivalent or something. Or just using glowstone or a sea lantern, because those always look cool. But besides that, this system completely works. And while I don't have it built, you could expand this. So I'm just going to put this back real quick, so it's because it's a bit of an easier seat to work with. But like, you can easily expand this. I'm not going to do it here because I don't want to accidentally break something, which I probably would actually. But this can be a whole bunch of slices wide. And you can probably just see that. Like, every single time something gets triggered, it gets triggered from this end, and that's just a redstone line. So, like, for example, if you wanted to have, like, yeah, you just, like, replace this glass block with an observer and put it there. Things like that. The reason that I'm worried about doing that here is that because I've already put all of these pistons here, if I break one of these, it will actually trigger the observer next to it because the redstone changes. Actually, this is one I can actually demonstrate. Like, if I were to break this, that redstone does change its shape, and it actually triggers. So, that's why I'm not adding this right now. But yeah, so that's that system. The next part is this mess, this couple blocks wide tangle of redstone. This tangle of redstone, its only job is to get signals from the feed tape here. You can see I have a nice lineup of all of the data. It's like a ribbon cable, and that, like, this thing's job is to get the signal to the pistons that actually do the triggering. And by the way, the reason that I needed to add the redstone dust here, which is something to keep in mind actually if you were to build something like this yourself, is that if I don't have this here, which I'm going to demonstrate with this one again, then when this observer extends and then retracts, it actually triggers twice. So I think I can trigger this here, because it's changing the shape of this redstone dust. When it extends, this redstone attaches to the observer and changes it. So when you build this, if you want it to be 1 block wide, you have to include something that the redstone attaches to here. Oops, and that's what I was trying to avoid. That breaks everything. This one isn't actually too difficult to fix, but there. But yeah, so if you were to, yeah. So if it's 1 block wide, you need that. You need to have the extra block there. Back to this. Sorry, I got sidetracked there. So this tangle just gets the signal from the bottom to the top without mixing signals. And this was actually the hardest thing to do, is figure out where all the wires go. Everything else was actually relatively easy compared to that. Anyway, the next part, this part, I think this is purple. I guess I'm slightly colorblind, so I couldn't tell whether that was purple or blue at first. But anyway, this row of repeaters, so more accurately, these 2 rows of repeaters, this one and this one, are the timing setups. So if this would break everything because the pistons are in the way, but if I were to trigger every single data line at exactly the same time, the signal would get to each of these pistons at, well, actually not exactly the same time, but exactly the same time as, like, all of the signals would come out here exactly the same time. So, like, if I were to trigger, say, like, these 3 pistons, it would actually trigger bottom, then top, and yeah, bottom, middle, top in rapid succession, because it takes time for the signal to get through these observers. But anyway, yeah, so that's what that is. This row is just pure timing to make sure that when I run this, it doesn't trigger things out of order and break. The next part is the feed tape, I think. Or do I want to do that first? That's actually kind of simple. I'll do the feed tape. The feed tape is where the whole program is stored. So if I start this, I'm going to actually run this so you can see what's happening. You can see as this is running, the program gets read out on these repeaters. Also, sorry, that's extremely loud. For demonstrating this, I'm going to turn the volume down a lot. But yeah, so yeah, you can see that the data gets sent out from where it's stored on the feed tape through the repeaters to the system. That's where all the sequencing is. And the program is the solid blocks on this, so the concrete in this case. And as it gets pushed in front, the solid blocks allow the signal to come through, and that gives the program. This feed tape is designed to be very fast, so like everything triggers in pairs. So it takes exactly 2 piston firings, or exactly 2 groups of piston firings to move it by 1. Oh, and just for clarity here, the yellow and orange line here is just a marker. So like this marker is the end of opening, and this marker is the end of closing. Yeah, so another pattern you'll notice if you looked at the program here is you'll see this a lot, this shape. This is the shape of retracting pistons, because if I were to trigger this again, then what it's doing is it's pulling this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. So it's doing I think I broke something. What did I break? One moment. I broke something and I don't know. Oh, that's what I broke. That's actually really annoying. I don't remember what the end state is supposed to be for this. This is supposed to be open right now. One moment, I need to figure this out. So, yeah. So me messing around earlier to demonstrate what everything did actually just completely broke it. So I need to how many pistons is this? One moment. I can fix this real quick. Give me a second. Sorry, mid-video fixing. Just want to put down where those were so I can remember. Nothing can trigger those, right? Yeah. It should do its closing sequence now, which I don't want to let it do. This is a good opportunity to see that you can see all of the observers firing there. They're really quick, but... Okay, there we go. Anyway, the reason I put those pistons there is I want to make sure I get exactly the right number of pistons. Otherwise, I've made an error. Yep. Top piston can come down here. This piston can go up. One moment. I had to do this a bunch of times when I was trying to build it because I broke things. I think that's the right setup. One moment. Let me hopefully not break this again, just to make sure this is workable for demonstration in a bit. I think this is fixed. I think if it was going to break, it would have broken already. Yeah, that's fixed. Okay, I'm just gonna let that finish running now. But anyway, yeah, so actually, wait, that part of the program is going through right now. So you can see how when they're, yeah. So you can see when they're retracting, they retract in pairs and sort of inchworm down, which you will see once this whole stack starts trying to retract, which will be a moment because it has to do all the top processing there, which is almost done. Yeah, so you can see that pattern. It inchworms down. And if I run this one more time, you will see that inchworm pattern. You can see that it's always, like, it's alternating sets of pistons. That is what that pattern is right there. So, anyway, that was a long way of saying this pattern means they're retracting because that's the way that just the pattern ends up looking, because that's where the pistons are. Whenever you see something like this, this is it extending, and then everything in the gray here is just the other side. So you'll actually see, like, this is an extension here. I think there's a retraction somewhere in here, but it's actually, like, the retraction doesn't look as interesting on the grays because they there's only a couple pistons to retract. Like, it's only a double piston extender, so it won't actually look much. But here's that pattern. This is a retraction here. But yeah, so that's the program. That's how it's stored. This method actually, like, this would lag the game less if I were to put a large roof over it and keep it in the dark, because the reason this lags is from lighting updates. Every time it moves, it has to reprocess what all the lights are because of the glass there and also the solid blocks getting moved. So that's just a tip there. Anyway, you can see that all of these have, like, all the earlier ones have some repeaters on them for timing. That's, again, just to keep everything in perfect sync. That's what allows it to be in perfect pairs. But the feed tape If I run it one more time here, make sure I didn't break anything. Yep, we're good. You can see when it's running, it's very quick, but it goes right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. That's those pairs of pistons. So like right here, it's top, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom. You can see that moving. And that is the same throughout the whole system. Everything that triggers first is connected to the right lane, and everything that triggers second is connected to the left lane. Yeah. Yeah, so that is what runs that. And then the last part of this is when it comes to, that. See the observer here. Every time it moves, it pulses. I was very careful to make sure that nothing, there is nothing that the observer can trigger along that, except for this. The reason the observer there, and the reason that this red line exists, the red line is the timing, or is the timing limiter, which I don't know what, you could just call it the timer. Basically, wherever I put an observer on here, it will stop one cycle after that reaches here. So, yeah. So where the observer goes is a good way to put it. The place that the observer is the last thing that happens before it halts. And I'm controlling that with this system, which is 100% way too big and can be made much smaller by a ton, but I try to make it both fast, this needs to cut off the signal quickly, or actually other way around, but it also needs to be fairly robust, so when that triggers, this will stop itself. But you can see that it's just a big switch. When I hit a button, 01, if I keep hitting the button, nothing happens. This is just a RS neural latch. But it's an RS neural latch that can respond to single tick pulses, because just as a quick example, if I were to build just a normal RS neural latch, which is this, it works fine with a button. You can see it latches back and forth. Most people who've done Redstone are familiar with that circuit. But if I were to do a single tick pulse, like an observer, that does not turn off a torch. That is pulsing, it's just not visible. And to make it a little bit more clear, I'm just going to make that a piece of redstone. You can see that is pulsing, but it is not triggering. That's because redstone torches just don't respond to that quick of a pulse, which means that a standard RS neural latch would not work unless I added a pulse extender, which adds delay. I do not want to add delay. That is the main thing. I want this to stop as quickly as I can make it after that observer gets there, so that it doesn't overrun, and so that that observer is as close to the end of the timing as possible. Another nice thing about how this works is that I won't be able to demonstrate it because this is going to be way too long and I'm not that good with timing, but actually maybe. If you either just press the button at the right time, or if that stays extended, it doesn't break anything. All that does is make it so that it doesn't stop. So if I keep that powered on, it'll just keep opening and closing and opening and closing and opening and closing forever. Or until I turn the lever off. Or until my computer crashes because I let Minecraft run for years. Anyway, but yeah, I'm gonna wait for this just so you can see that that does in fact work, but it's just not an unintended feature, but it is a very nice one. By the way, this is the fastest that the circuit can run. If this ran any faster, the feed tape actually still works, but the pistons here, pistons take time to move even if they're single tick pulsed. By the way, you can see there it's closed and there immediately starts opening again. That's what that does. Anyway, but yeah, so pistons always have amount of time that they take to move. So if I made that any faster, then the pistons can't move fast enough. They are told to trigger again before they're done triggering the last time. So that means that this is the fastest that this clock can run, and I think the fastest you could make this kind of machine. You could probably make this using zero-tick pulses, but not nearly as compact or anything. And you might be able to make this go faster. I actually don't know if the delay between gets shorter if you zero-tick instead of one-tick pulse the pistons. But, yeah. Well, by the way, this is another example of like things only happen exactly when they need to. You can see that as soon as the door is open, that is the halting point. It will not do anything to set up for the next closing when it has just finished opening. I could have made it do that, but it does not do that. So that, like, pistons only start moving, like, the beginning of the opening sequence is that first thing. Nothing happens to facilitate the opening before that. So yeah, or the closing actually in that case. Anyway, also yes, I know I used diamond blocks here. It looks terrible. I wanted, like, I probably could have chosen a better block than diamond block, but I chose to use diamond and iron for this set because I want to be able to see the points. Like, you can see diamond blocks. There is, I'm going to use light blue here. So, diamond blocks, there's a very obvious border between each block, but concrete there is not unless you're looking at it. So I wanted to be able to recognize where each block space was instead of just having, like, if this was bigger, I have no clue where the edges of a block are unless I try to do like actually look at the outline. So that was why I chose that. Everywhere else I used concrete because in these cases there is something on it that obviously indicates. So yeah. Anyway. Also, you just have the last thing here, which is just the, like, this is just what makes us be able to get power through there. This is always on, it just passes power through solid blocks. I just want to mention that in case anyone wanted to know. If I remember, I'm going to put the world download for this in, because I'm going to put that in, the other things that are here, in case you're curious. Well, single piston iron block doesn't do anything. That was an experiment. And this is me messing around with zero-tick pulses. I was not able to get something working. I was hoping that if I zero-tick pulse it, I would be able to make stuff happen instantly, but there is still a delay. And then this, which obviously is not connected to a feed tape. This is a machine that I was just messing with sequencing. So what this does is it opens up the wall. It pushes that iron block out from here without opening up any of this part of the wall, and then retracts in and hides itself again. The sequencing all works. I've done it manually. I just haven't programmed a feed tape for it, and I don't know if I will. But if you want to figure that out, then go for it. I tried to make this using a one block gap, but unfortunately you always need something there. This is V1 of my program counter, so this does work. Basically, this is just a binary counter. It is fully functional. Like, it works just fine. But it's slow and has a few other limitations that I will discuss when I look at the next thing. But this one uses T flip-flops, like original design. But that works. This is V2, or actually V3. I sort of overwrote V2 when working on V3. This one, as you can see from this clock, can run insanely fast. That does not mean that it is settled extremely fast. It means that it can take an input extremely fast. So, like, if I pulse this 100 times at that speed, it would count to 100. But if I, it would not instantly do that. So, like, if I do this real quick, which I'll explain what these do in a moment, but, like, if I did this, you can see that the carry, like, if you haven't seen the binary counter, basically it's just, like, it counts in binary, but this is just carrying from one bit to the next. It's the same thing as if you added, like, 1, if you had, like, 99 plus 1, you end up with 100, like, you carry the ones a couple times. Same thing's happening there, although this time it doesn't actually get to the end because it carries and then runs out of places to put the next number. So it's like if you were doing 99 plus 1 and then you ran out of room to put the 1 next to the 100, so you ended up with a 0. But you could see that that took a long time to settle to 0. So while it can count really fast, it actually doesn't settle into a state for about 20 seconds, which in my case is fine. I'm going to be using this in a computer that runs in about a 30-second clock cycle, probably. I haven't quite worked that one out yet, so this one will fit. But the reason that I went with this version is, one, it's actually more compact in terms of the actual counter, so that's really nice. And obviously can run faster, but also I can set it. So like if I'm just going to run this for a couple seconds just so I end up with a value here. And when it's running this fast, it's very hard to actually see what's going on. I acknowledge that, but I just need to fill it up with a few values. So if I hit this button, the green button, that's a clear. It will set all of these to 0. No matter what, that will always be 0. The white button sets all of the switches to exactly what's displayed here. So at the moment it's all 1s, but if I like did this, I'm not going to go all the way down, but if I did something like that and then press the white button, then it would write that in. And it'll always overwrite whatever's there. So that's what that does. Which, if you're unfamiliar with how with what a program counter is, basically this is the thing that keeps track of what part of the program you're in, what instruction you're reading. So clearing just puts it back at the first instruction ever in the memory, and then I can set it to a value, so I could say, oh, I want to jump to this part of the program. That's what the other value is for there. And you can see that my solution, I think, is actually pretty nice. I'm using 2 pistons. If I want to set something, then I just push it out, and that pushes the redstone block back in. If I want to reset something, I push it out, and then I pull it back. Which, that took way longer than you might expect to work out. Also, the counter module itself, like, was an accident. It works really well, but I did not intend for that to work as it did. I was working on another part of it, and that just happened to do what I expected. Like, that motion is so weird, but it works. So, yep, and I can clear this. But that works well. That's what that is if you're curious. And that's 32 bits if you don't want to count them. That's exactly 32 numbers that you could get an output from. Which is why I built it that size, because that's the number of bits in my computer, 32-bit computer. And then this one, which actually can run faster, but this is a randomizer. Basically, I say, give me a new random number, and it gives me a new random number every time you press the button. And there's absolutely no use for this, but if you ran it extremely fast, you get a new random number in every single cycle. So, yeah. But anyway, so yeah, random number generator, if you want it. Also 32-bit. Anyway, I think that's going to be the end of this video. So, I'll put world download in the description. I would put a structure file, except I'm pretty sure this is way bigger than 32 blocks in every dimension. So, I would need to do some weirdness to get that to work. But world download definitely. If I could figure out how to get carpet working, I would do a schematic, but the way I launched the game just does not allow it. But anyway, so yeah. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I am planning on working on a 5-tall version at some point, just not quite yet. The thing is, like, 5-tall version is pretty much identical to 4-tall. I think it'll need 2 observers. But, like, it's the same thing. Build the piston layout, which would be very similar, just not quite the same. Attach all of it to the feed tape, which is the hard part, and then figure out the feed tape a step at a time. So, I don't know. Might be a bit before I actually do that, just because there isn't much new there. Anyway, yeah. Yes, so hope you enjoyed. If you liked, then you can like. If you have any ideas for new piston sequencing challenges or fun doors or things that I might be able to try, I'll probably solve most problems with a feed tape, because it's very easy to see the pattern. Like, you could read this and figure out what the instruction is, but I just like that you can see the program laid out. Anyway, so yeah, so let me know some new ideas that you might want me to try at some point, because great challenges. Yeah. If you aren't subbed, then you can subscribe if you want to. If you don't want to, that's fine. And yeah, I stream on twitch.tv/circuitrygamer77. Like, pretty much all of my streams go up on the channel, so you can see the VODs too. But, yeah, you can chat with me and things, so best way to let me know ways to work on things would probably be through chat on the stream. My streaming schedule isn't great. I'm working on that, but at the moment I'm very inconsistent in streaming. However, that should be fixed hopefully once I get around, like once I actually figure it out how. So yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and see you in another video.